Here we see the president and the first bitch. Hey, slow down, you bitch. Let me catch up. Hillary Clinton invited Newt Gingrich and his mother to the White House. Apparently, she's hoping they'll get caught in the crossfire. Here we see President Clinton looking for something, anything, to hug besides his wife. In Whitewater news, federal regulators quizzed Hillary Clinton at the White House this week and gave her a perfect score on the lying section. She's a dirty liar. Our top story tonight. As new questions arise about Hillary Clinton's role in Whitewater, the president appears to be distancing himself from the First Lady. Earlier today in his weekly radio address, the president insisted, "Hey, I sleep with hundreds of girls. I can't vouch for all of them, you know?" Meanwhile, the war of words between President Clinton and New York Times columnist William Safire continued to heat up. It all began when Safire called the First Lady a, quote, congenital liar. Clinton responded by saying Safire, quote, deserves a pop in the nose. Safire replied by offering to fight Bill Clinton, quote, anytime, any place. The president answered, quote, how about right now? Then hopped a plane to England and lit up a big fat joint. Is the First Lady a compulsive liar, though? It's beginning to look that way. In an interview on last night's 2020, intended to promote her new book, It Takes a Village, Mrs. Clinton folded under tough questioning by Barbara Walters and admitted that, in fact, it does not take a village, and furthermore, that she was aware that it does not take a village when she wrote the damn book. Oh, my tie looks funny? Thanks there, Bobby. For years, Hillary Rodham Clinton has told people that she was named for the first man to climb Mount Everest, Sir Edmund Hillary. But as Esquire magazine recently pointed out, Sir Edmund did not climb Mount Everest until 1953, 6 years after Hillary was born. However, the First Lady does have a good explanation for the discrepancy. She loves to lie. More questions about Hillary Rodham Clinton's truthfulness. In an interview this week, the First Lady claimed that she won the women's 100-meter dash at the 1956 Olympics, and that she had an IQ of, quote, over 700. When it was pointed out to her that these were not especially good lies, Mrs. Clinton responded, I know, I have a problem, and then added, I invented the formula for 7-Up. Our top story tonight. Astronaut Shannon Lucid, back on Earth after a record 6 months in space, was welcomed home Tuesday with a phone call from President Clinton. Said the president, quote, this is just the beginning. One day we'll be able to send an American into space indefinitely, and I hope it's a woman. In the final days of the presidential campaign, Bob Dole has $19 million left to spend, while President Clinton has more than $32 million. Dole plans to use his $19 million for TV ads, radio spots, and mass mailings, while a confident President Clinton has allotted all of his $32 million to a crooked Arkansas land scheme. Though more indictments are likely in the Whitewater investigation, President Clinton is still refusing to say whether he will pardon former Whitewater associates Jim and Susan McDougal. But when asked if he would pardon First Lady Hillary Clinton, the president was crystal clear, quote, she does the crime, she does the time. The announcement of the verdict came toward the end of President Clinton's annual State of the Union address, and to many observers, completely overshadowed the event. Even the president was distracted during his speech, waiting to hear exactly how much it costs to kill your wife. At the White House this week, President Clinton officially came out against same-sex marriages. What's more, the president said he is not too crazy about opposite-sex marriages either. Well, Chelsea Clinton turned 16 a few weeks ago, and apparently her father has been teaching her to drive. Early reports say that under the president's tutelage, the first daughter has become exceptionally good at cruising for chicks. This week, in a speech honoring Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., President Clinton said that if Dr. King were alive today, he would have supported the deployment of U.S. troops to Bosnia. Later, when asked how he could use the late civil rights leader's name in such a self-serving manner, Clinton hopped a plane to England and lit up a big fat joint. Meanwhile, President Clinton is hard at work on Tuesday's State of the Union address, in which he'll focus on crime, education, and the economy. At the request of the First Lady, part of the president's speech will be huge lies. Last week, the president vetoed a Republican bill to balance the budget, and he used a pen that belonged to former President Lyndon Johnson. Clinton has also been working his way through John F. Kennedy's vast supply of condoms. A frightening moment this week for First Lady Hillary Clinton. Her plane, en route to the former Soviet Union, was forced to make an emergency landing when it was discovered that a frayed wire in the engine was causing serious malfunctions. The president was said to be furious and demanded an immediate investigation of what went wrong with Operation Frayed Wire. Gosh, Hillary looks pretty in this photo here, doesn't she? Never realized she was such a looker till I see her here in this picture. President Clinton was in Austin, Texas last Monday, the day of the Million Man March. The president said in a speech, "I'm here to speak to you today because right now in Washington, D.C., there's like 1 million black guys." Well, more O.J. Simpson news. On Friday, the Juice officially endorsed Bill Clinton for president, adding, quote, "I'd like to help him any way I can." To which the president replied, "Well, there is one thing." This weekend, veteran news anchorman David Brinkley apologized to Bill Clinton for an election night commentary in which he called the president, quote, "boring and uncreative." Admitted Brinkley, "There was certainly nothing uncreative about the way you moved Vince Foster's body." The president's a murderer. You didn't know that? Speaking in Australia this week about the problems of being America's First Lady, Hillary Clinton joked, quote, "Perhaps I'll walk around with a bag over my head when I come out into public and have no opinions and never express them publicly or privately." To which the president replied, "Yes, yes, oh God, yes." A Connecticut hotel where Bill Clinton spent the night has donated to a charity auction a bagel the president ordered from room service but never ate. Though potential bidders should be advised, while the president never actually ate the bagel, he did have, quote, "relations with it." Sounds delicious. And now the fake news, our top story tonight, with growing indications that First Lady Hillary Clinton may be indicted for her role in Whitewater. President Clinton is reportedly starting to prepare for that possibility. Plans so far include renting a hall, hiring a band, and making a giant bathtub with margaritas. This week, President Clinton made history when he nominated Madeleine Albright to be first female Secretary of State. Responding to critics who say that she is not the best choice, the president insisted, quote, "She looks a lot better after a couple of drinks." Our top story tonight. This Monday, the Supreme Court will begin hearing arguments over whether Paula Jones' sexual harassment suit against President Clinton may proceed. Jones, who claims that while governor of Arkansas, Clinton exposed himself to her in a hotel room, says that she can accurately and precisely describe the president's genitalia. But White House spokesman scoffed, quote, "Any woman who's worked in the state of Arkansas for the last 20 years could do that." Just hours after, works both ways. Just hours after President Clinton again pledged to clean up the Democratic Party's fundraising operation, the White House announced he will attend a $1 million fundraiser next week. However, spokesman Mike McCurry stressed that at this event, quote, "Donations from Indonesia or other foreign countries will not be accepted unless they are left in a brown paper bag under the sink in the men's room." Unquote. Our top story tonight, in a startling reversal, Kenneth Starr announced yesterday that he would not resign as Whitewater special prosecutor and that now he intends to stay on until the investigation is completed. This new development apparently did not trouble a confident President Clinton, who still plans to resume making conjugal visits to Susan McDougal. Yesterday, President Clinton underwent a 2-hour operation to repair damage to his knee, suffered in a fall while visiting in Florida at the home of professional golfer Greg Norman. Many were surprised to hear that the two were on friendly terms, since Greg Norman had once threatened that if he ever caught Clinton with his wife again, he'd smash his kneecap with a 5-iron. The president spent last night at Bethesda Naval Hospital in a private room, which he shared with 3 Chinese businessmen who came up with the required $200,000. President Clinton this week declined an offer by Republicans to form a bipartisan commission to scale back annual increases in Social Security. Asked why he rejected the proposals, the president said, quote, "Personally, I like the idea of a bipartisan commission. However, the 2 Chinese guys who gave me $1 million, they didn't go for it. They just didn't like the idea." This week, the White House asked Congress to authorize $175 billion in funds for highway construction, mass transit, and other transportation projects. The president's plan has significant support in Congress, but many Washington insiders are wondering how exactly this benefits China. Story tonight. Late this week, President Clinton and Russian President Boris Yeltsin met in Helsinki to discuss the sensitive topic of NATO expansion. For his part, Yeltsin stood firm, saying he must do what is right for Russia, while Clinton also stood firm, saying he must do what is right for China. Following the surprise withdrawal of his nominee, Anthony Lake, President Clinton has chosen acting CIA Director George Tenet to head up the agency. Now all he needs is the approval of the House, the Senate, and this Chinese guy. In a radio interview this week, First Lady Hillary Clinton scoffed at conspiracy nuts, as she called them, obsessed with Whitewater, and compared them to cult figures, or cult groups rather, fascinated by UFOs and the Hale-Bopp comet. Although she did concede one point of similarity between Whitewater and Heaven's Gate, 39 castrated dead people. Secretary of State Madeleine Albright has announced that she will represent the United States this summer at ceremonies marking the transfer of British Hong Kong to Chinese rule. President Clinton also plans to attend the event, but he will be representing China. So. Our top story tonight in court documents made public this week. Independent counsel Kenneth Starr told a federal judge that Hillary Clinton is now a, quote, central figure in the Whitewater criminal probe. Reacting to the news, President Clinton called the investigation a partisan witch hunt, vowing, quote, if the First Lady is somehow convicted and has to go to jail, I will do everything in my power to wait 2 weeks to start dating. Meanwhile, FBI Director Louis Freeh said this week that Attorney General Janet Reno might have a conflict of interest in her investigation of Democratic fundraising. Freeh also pointed out that Reno might have a conflict of interest between her X and Y chromosomes. Our top story tonight, court-martial proceedings are set to begin Tuesday against Air Force Lieutenant Kelly Flynn, the nation's first female B-52 pilot. Flynn is accused of conducting an adulterous affair with a married man, as well as having a brief fling with a second airman, and then lying about it. An Air Force prosecutor called her, quote, a sexual predator, while her commanding officer called her a, quote, lying sex addict. Meanwhile, President Clinton called her. Well, the White House is an empty nest this week following Chelsea Clinton's departure to begin studies at Stanford University. A wistful President Clinton says that while it's difficult to see his daughter grow up, at least now he'll feel less guilty about hitting on her friends. Our top story tonight, just yesterday in a letter to Congress, Attorney General Janet Reno absolved President Clinton of almost all charges of campaign finance reform. According to Reno, there is no evidence he misused his office to raise money, improperly allowed contributors to stay overnight at the White House, or sought contributions in exchange for political favors. You know, it's hard for me to believe this, but for Janet Reno to send this letter, I guess it must be true. The president's sleeping with her, too. It's beyond comprehension, but... Story tonight, does President Clinton have a bent penis? Well, according to a doctor who examined him last week, the president's genitals are, quote, completely 100% normal. It should be noted, however, that the doctor who examined him also has a bent penis. So, that may color his findings a little. While this controversy raged, the president himself was on a state trip to South America, where he met with various leaders and repeatedly stressed his strong ties to the region. Finally asked to elaborate on these ties, Clinton replied, "Are you kidding me? My brother Roger was a huge coke dealer." As his last stop on the trip, the president met in Buenos Aires Thursday with Argentinian President Carlos Menem. During the meeting, Clinton asked Menem to continue with economic reform and protect democratic freedoms. Menem, in turn, asked Clinton to show him his bent penis. Thank you. I'm Norm MacDonald. Now the fake news. Our top story tonight. Last night, ex-sportscaster Marv Albert and fiancée Heather Faulkner appeared on 2020 with Barbara Walters in what Albert admitted was an uphill battle to have a really hot three-way. Earlier today, following 2 weeks of provocation by Saddam Hussein over UN weapons inspection, President Clinton has issued his clearest warning yet to the Iraqi leader. The unusually frank, strongly worded letter reads as follows, quote, should your government persist in flouting international law, I will have no choice but to order military action which will be both swift and devastating. Of course, when the time for military action comes, I may simply panic, flee to England, and smoke dope until the whole thing's over. But then again, I may not. On Capitol Hill this week, 17 Republican congressmen formally asked the House Judiciary Committee whether there is sufficient evidence to begin impeachment proceedings against President Clinton. In response, the president said, quote, hey, you know who would have the answer to that question? Vince Foster. With the release of over 100 hours of videotape of President Clinton and campaign fundraisers, the pressure continues to mount on Attorney General Janet Reno to name an independent counsel to investigate the president. In addition, some senators are said to be furious that instead of watching the videotapes, Reno has been taping over them with episodes of Xena Warrior Princess. Top story tonight, as the war of words between the U.S. and Iraq continues to heat up, President Clinton today sent his latest blunt message to Saddam Hussein. Quote, as our two nations appear headed toward military conflict, let history record that all this could have been avoided with a simple $50,000 contribution to the Democratic National Committee. The blood is on your hands. Story tonight. This week, the Clinton White House angrily denied charges that burial plots in Arlington National Cemetery were being handed out as political favors. Although presidential spokesman Mike McCurry did acknowledge that it is not easy to explain the tomb of the unknown Asian contributor. This week, an angry President Clinton demanded that Congress stop dragging its feet on something he has long championed, a medical Bill of Rights for U.S. citizens. In all, there are 10 items in the President's Bill of Rights, running from number 1, a rich, satisfying sex life is the foundation of good health, to number 10, a straight penis is not a privilege, it is a right. First Lady Hillary Clinton has been out of the country this week visiting the remote region of Siberia. Said the president, quote, when the cat's away, the mice... Oh, who am I kidding? The mouse screws plenty of women even when the cat's right here. Top story tonight. This week, Attorney General Janet Reno announced she will not name an independent counsel to investigate campaign fundraising by the president. At a press conference, she said, quote, the decision was mine. It was based on the facts, on the law, not pressure, not politics, not any other factor. She was then led away at gunpoint by the First Lady and 9 Chinese guys. Meanwhile, President Clinton was in Akron, Ohio this week, presiding at a town meeting about race relations in America. The president chose Akron as the site of the meeting, partly because it is the home of the Coming Together Project, an organized effort to end racism, and partly because it is the home of Suzanne Rosenberg, an old classmate from Oxford the president still has sex with. On Tom Snyder this week, actor Tony Danza said he thought the recent open display of affection by lesbian couple Ellen DeGeneres and Anne Hesh in front of President Clinton was extremely disrespectful. On hearing the comment, President Clinton responded, someone should tell Tony Danza to shut the hell up. Our top story tonight, this week, following revelations that he lied about his military service, the body of former diplomat and Democratic contributor Larry Lawrence was removed from Arlington Cemetery. Commenting on the affair, an angry President Clinton called it, quote, the most outrageous deception regarding one's military service since me. President Clinton met this week with Chinese dissident Wei Jiangxing, a leading advocate of democracy in China, who had been imprisoned and tortured for nearly 18 years. However, the meeting had to be abruptly cut short when the president learned that Mr. Jiangxing is broke. At a congressional hearing this week, Republicans blasted Attorney General Janet Reno for her refusal to investigate White House fundraising. Responding to criticisms, Reno said, wow, some congressmen must really want their homes firebombed and run over by tanks, huh? Well, President Clinton received an early Christmas present this week, an adorable Labrador puppy. And presidential historians say that it will be good for his image. According to these scholars, in comparison to a male dog, the president's sex life will seem relatively normal. Well, a sad story from the world of entertainment this week. Actor Bob Bell, better known to millions as Bozo the Clown, has died at the age of 75. Commenting on his passing, President Clinton said, quote, you know, For $50,000, he can be buried next to JFK.